The empty cabin stood on the edge of the prairie like a solitary gravestone, marking the place where Adam Calloway's heart had been buried alongside his son. The year was 1871, and the unforgiving Wyoming territory cared little for a man's grief or his loneliness. Adam leaned against the weathered porch post, his calloused hands cradling a wrinkled letter that had arrived 6 months ago, informing him that his only boy, Thomas, had fallen at the Battle of Lookout Mountain. The war had been over for years, but for Adam, the fighting had never stopped. It had simply moved inside him. 5 miles away, in the small but growing town of Lusk, Wyoming territory, Nora Matthews stared out the window of the general store she now owned alone. Her husband James had succumbed to pneumonia last winter, leaving her with a business to run and an emptiness that seemed to consume everything. She hadn't truly smiled since they'd lowered his coffin into the frozen ground. The townspeople had grown accustomed to her solemn nods and businesslike demeanor, efficient but distant, like a portrait of a woman rather than the woman herself. The spring rains had given way to summer heat, and Adam knew he couldn't put off the trip to town any longer. His supplies were dwindling, and the small herd of cattle he maintained needed salt blocks. He saddled his bay gelding at first light, the horse eager for the journey after weeks of routine rides around the property. The main street of Lusk was busy with the usual traffic freight wagons heading north to the Black Hills, settlers passing through on their way west, and locals conducting their daily business. Adam tied his horse at the hitching post outside the general store, brushing trail dust from his faded blue shirt before stepping inside. The bell above the door announced his arrival, but Nora Matthews barely glanced up from where she was tallying figures in a ledger. "I'll be with you in a moment," she said, her voice flat and practiced. Adam removed his hat, revealing sun-bleached brown hair with strands of silver at the temples. "No hurry, madam." He moved toward the shelves of canned goods, mentally calculating what he needed. When Nora finally approached him, her eyes registered a flicker of recognition. "Mr. Calloway, isn't it? You have the place out by Rawhide Creek." "Yes, madam," he replied, surprised she remembered. "Been a while since I've come to town. 6 months, I believe." Nora's memory for business was impeccable. "You bought extra coffee and ammunition last time." Adam nodded, uncomfortable with the personal observation. "Need the usual supplies, plus some salt blocks for the cattle." As Nora gathered his items, Adam noticed how thin she looked, how the light blue dress hung loosely on her frame. He'd heard about her husband's passing during his last visit to town, but hadn't given it much thought then, consumed as he was by his own loss. "How many salt blocks will you need?" she asked, interrupting his thoughts. 3 should do it." Adam cleared his throat. "I was sorry to hear about your husband, Mrs. Matthews. James was a fair man." Something flickered across Nora's face. Pain, perhaps, or surprise that this taciturn rancher would mention her loss. "Thank you," she said simply, turning away to fetch the salt blocks from the storeroom. Adam waited, studying the store. It was well organized, but showed signs of strain. Some shelves were understocked, and the floor needed a good sweeping. Running such an establishment alone couldn't be easy. When Nora returned, struggling slightly with the heavy blocks, Adam stepped forward instinctively. "Let me," he said, taking them from her arms. Their hands brushed, and for a moment, they both froze at the unexpected contact. Adam saw something in her eyes, then not just grief, but a weariness that matched his own. "I can have these delivered to your ranch if you'd prefer," Nora offered, recovering her composure. "No need, I've got my wagon coming behind me. My ranch hand will be along shortly." Adam placed the blocks on the counter. "How much do I owe you?" As Nora calculated his bill, the store door opened again, admitting Sheriff Robert Fuller, a stocky man with a thick mustache who nodded at Adam before addressing Nora. "Mrs. Matthews, just wanted to let you know we caught those boys who broke your back window last week. Their fathers will be covering the repair costs." Nora's shoulders tensed visibly. "Thank you, Sheriff. I appreciate that." After the lawman departed, Adam found himself asking, "Trouble?" "Just some young men with too much time on their hands," Nora replied dismissively, though her hand trembled slightly as she wrote out his receipt. "Your total comes to $12.87. Adam counted out the money, adding an extra $1. When Nora raised an eyebrow, he said gruffly, "For the window." "That's not necessary, Mr. Calloway." "Adam," he corrected her, and I know it's not necessary, but my boy would have done the same." The words surprised him. He rarely spoke of Thomas to anyone. Nora studied him for a long moment. "Your son was in the war, wasn't he?" Adam's jaw tightened. "Yes. He didn't come back." The simple statement hung in the air between them, bridging their separate islands of loss. Nora handed him his receipt with a gentleness that hadn't been there before. "I'm sorry." "As am I, Mrs. Matthews," Adam replied, placing his hat back on his head. "As am I." Outside, his ranch hand, Eduardo, had arrived with the wagon. As they loaded the supplies, Adam found himself glancing back at the store, where Nora Matthews stood watching them through the window, her face a pale oval framed by chestnut hair. He lifted his hand in a small salute, and to his surprise, she returned the gesture. The ride back to his ranch was quieter than usual, with Eduardo sensing his employer's thoughtful mood. Adam's mind kept returning to Nora Matthews' face, to the sorrow etched there, and to the strange recognition he'd felt, as if looking into a mirror that reflected not his features, but his pain. 2 weeks later, Adam was repairing a section of fence when he heard approaching hoofbeats. He straightened, hand moving instinctively to the revolver at his hip, relaxing only when he recognized the delivery wagon from town with its distinctive red wheels. The driver, a young man named Peter, whom Adam had seen working at the livery stable, pulled the team to a halt. "Mr. Calloway, got a delivery for you from the general store." Adam frowned, walking over. "Must be a mistake. I didn't order anything." Peter shrugged. "Mrs. Matthews was specific, said these items were paid for and to bring them out to you." He handed down a crate containing coffee, sugar, and several books. "Books?" Adam muttered, examining the unexpected items. "There's a note," Peter pointed out, already turning the wagon around. "Good day to you, sir." Adam watched him leave before opening the folded paper tucked between the coffee tins. "Mr. Calloway, I recalled you mentioning once that your son enjoyed adventure stories. These were my husband's favorites. They deserve to be read rather than gathering dust on my shelf. Consider it repayment for your kindness. N. Matthews." Adam stared at the note, then at the book's tales of exploration and distant lands, their spines cracked from repeated readings. Something tightened in his chest, not the familiar vice of grief, but something else, something he couldn't quite name. That evening, after his chores were done, Adam sat by the fire and opened one of the books. It had been years since he'd read anything beyond cattle prices in newspapers, or the occasional letter. Thomas had been the reader in the family, always with his nose in a book when not working the ranch. Adam had sometimes teased him about it, in the good-natured way fathers do. The pages smelled of pipe tobacco, presumably James Matthews. Adam found himself wondering about the man, about the life he'd shared with Nora. Had they been happy? Had they planned for children? The questions were intrusive, but they kept coming as he turned the pages of the adventure tale, following a protagonist across stormy seas to unknown shores. Adam slept better that night than he had in months, his dreams filled not with the battlefield where his son had fallen, but with images from the book distant mountains and uncharted territories. The following Sunday, Adam did something he hadn't done in nearly a year. He attended church service in Lusk. He told himself it was because the new preacher was supposed to be worth hearing, but his eyes scanned the modest congregation until they found Nora Matthews, seated alone near the back. She wore a dark green dress that brought out the amber flecks in her eyes, and her hair was pinned up neatly beneath a small hat. Adam nodded to her as he took a seat on the opposite side of the church, and she acknowledged him with a slight inclination of her head. The sermon was forgettable, something about perseverance in the face of trials. But Adam found himself watching Nora's profile when he thought she wouldn't notice. Her features were fine, not beautiful in the conventional sense, but pleasant and intelligent. She didn't smile during the entire service, even when others laughed at the preacher's attempt at humor. Afterward, as the congregation spilled out into the churchyard, Adam deliberately made his way toward her. "Mrs. Matthews," he said, hat in hand, "I wanted to thank you for the books." "You're welcome," she replied, her voice as controlled as always. "I hope they provided some distraction." "They did. I stayed up reading half the night." Adam paused, then added, "I'd like to return the favor. Perhaps you join me for dinner at the hotel restaurant this evening?" Nora's eyes widened slightly at the unexpected invitation. "I couldn't possibly." "It's just a meal, Mrs. Matthews," Adam said quietly, "between two people who could probably use the company." Something in his straightforward approach seemed to reach her. After a moment's hesitation, she nodded. "Very well, Mr. Calloway. What time?" 6 o'clock? I'll be there." Adam spent the afternoon in an uncharacteristic state of nervousness, riding back to his ranch to change into his good shirt and the vest he hadn't worn since Thomas's enlistment day. He even attempted to trim his beard, nicking himself in the process. The Lusk Hotel restaurant was the finest establishment in town, which wasn't saying much. It had checkered tablecloths and actual glass windows, with a menu that stretched beyond the usual fare of beans and beef, to include chicken dishes and even fish brought in by the railroad. Nora arrived precisely at 6, wearing the same green dress, but with a different shawl and her hair arranged more elaborately. Adam stood as she approached their table, suddenly aware of how rough his hands looked against the white tablecloth. "Mrs. Matthews," he said, pulling out her chair, "thank you for coming." "Thank you for the invitation," she replied, settling herself with practiced grace. "It's been some time since I've dined out." "For me as well," Adam admitted. "I hope the food is still decent." A small silence fell between them, filled with the murmur of other diners and the clink of silverware. Adam searched for something to say, acutely aware that he'd spent most of the past year in the company of cattle rather than people. "I enjoyed the book about the Arctic expedition," he finally offered. "Never thought much about such places before." Nora's expression softened. James was fascinated by explorers. He always wanted to see more of the world than Wyoming, but she trailed off. "Life has a way of setting our paths for us," Adam finished. "My son was the same, always talking about what lay beyond the next ridge. That's why he enlisted, I think. Not just duty, but adventure." The waiter arrived to take their orders, and when he left, Nora surprised Adam by asking, "Would you tell me about your son? Thomas, wasn't it?" Adam hesitated, unaccustomed to speaking of his boy. But there was something in Nora's expression, a genuine interest, perhaps even a need that made him begin. Thomas was born during a blizzard in '43. His mother, Elizabeth, used to say he came into the world fighting, just like the storm outside. He was always strong, always curious. After Elizabeth passed from fever when he was 10, it was just the two of us. Adam found, to his astonishment, that once he started speaking about Thomas, the words came more easily. He told Nora about teaching his son to ride, about the time Thomas had tracked a lost calf through the night and brought it home safely, about his skill with horses and his dreams of expanding the ranch someday. "He was 19 when the war broke out," Adam said, his voice growing quieter. "I tried to convince him to stay. We were in Wyoming territory, far from the conflict. But he had notions about duty and honor, said he couldn't stand by while other men fought." Nora listened attentively, asking occasional questions that showed she was genuinely engaged. When their food arrived, Adam realized he'd been talking for nearly half an hour. "I'm sorry," he said, embarrassed. "I didn't mean to go on so long." "Please don't apologize," Nora replied. "It's good to remember them, isn't it? To speak their names aloud." During the meal, Adam managed to turn the conversation toward Nora, learning that she had come to Wyoming from Pennsylvania as a young bride, following James's dream of opportunity in the West. They'd built the general store from a tiny trading post to the substantial business it was now, working side by side for 15 years. "We never had children," Nora said, a shadow crossing her face. "It wasn't meant to be, I suppose. The store became our child in a way." As they shared a slice of apple pie for dessert, Adam found himself relaxing in a way he hadn't in years. There was something comforting about Nora's presence. She didn't demand cheerfulness or platitudes, nor did she treat him with the careful pity he'd grown to hate from others. "This was pleasant," Nora said, as he walked her back to the small apartment behind her store. "Thank you, Mr. Calloway." "Adam," he reminded her, "and it was my pleasure, Mrs. Matthews." "Nora," she conceded with the ghost of a smile. "Good night." Adam rode home under a sky brilliant with stars, feeling as though something had shifted inside him, not dramatically, but subtly, like the first thaw after a long winter. Over the next few weeks, Adam found reasons to visit town more frequently. Sometimes he would stop by the general store, with the pretense of needing supplies, staying to help Nora move heavy items or reach the highest shelves. Other times, He would simply ask if she'd join him for coffee at the small cafe down the street. Nora gradually began to anticipate his visits, he could tell. Though she rarely smiled, her eyes would brighten when he entered the store, and she became more animated in their conversations. They discovered a shared love of music. Adam had played the fiddle in his youth, and Nora had once been accomplished on the piano before moving west where such instruments were scarce. One day in early August, Adam arrived at the store to find it unusually busy. A stagecoach had stopped in town, bringing travelers who needed provisions, and Nora was visibly overwhelmed trying to serve everyone at once. Without being asked, Adam stepped behind the counter and began helping, measuring out flour and sugar, fetching items from high shelves, and even calculating change when Nora was occupied with another customer. They worked in tandem, moving around each other with an ease that felt surprisingly natural. When the last customer finally left, Nora turned to him with genuine warmth in her expression. "I don't know how I would have managed that alone. Thank you." "Reminded me of cattle branding season," Adam said with a shrug. "All hands on deck." Nora brushed a strand of hair from her forehead, leaving a smudge of flour on her temple. Without thinking, Adam reached out to brush it away, his fingers lingering for just a moment against her skin. The contact sent an unexpected jolt through him, and he saw Nora's eyes widen in response. "You had flour," he explained lamely, withdrawing his hand. "Oh." Nora touched the spot where his fingers had been. "Thank you." An awkward silence fell between them, broken when the door opened and Sheriff Fuller entered, looking harried. "Mrs. Matthews, there's been a rock slide on the North Road. Got some injured men being brought into town. Doc Peterson's setting up at the hotel and asked if you might have extra bandages and such." "Of course," Nora said, already moving to gather supplies. "How many injured?" 4, maybe 5. Freight wagon overturned trying to avoid the slide. The sheriff nodded to Adam. "Calloway, could use another pair of strong hands if you're willing." "I'll help," Adam said immediately. To Nora, he added, "I'll come back later to check on you." The next few hours were chaotic as the injured men were treated in the hotel dining room, hastily converted to a makeshift infirmary. Adam helped carry stretchers, hold men down as the doctor set broken bones, and fetch supplies as needed. Nora arrived with bandages, medicines from her store, and fresh water. She moved efficiently among the injured, assisting the doctor's wife with cleaning wounds and offering words of comfort to the men. Adam found himself watching her when he could, struck by the contrast between her usual reserved demeanor and the gentle compassion she showed now. When one young freight handler became delirious with pain, Nora sat beside him, cooling his forehead with a damp cloth and speaking softly until he calmed. It was past midnight when the situation finally stabilized. 2 of the men would recover fully, the doctor announced, while another had injuries that might leave him with a permanent limp. The 4th, most severely hurt, was still uncertain but resting comfortably after receiving laudanum. Adam found Nora sitting alone on the hotel porch, exhausted but unwilling to leave until she knew all the men were out of danger. "You should get some rest," he said, settling beside her on the bench. "You've done all you can." "So have you," she replied, looking at his blood-stained shirt. "You were remarkable in there." Adam shook his head. "Just did what needed doing. You're the one who surprised me, though I'm not sure why. Of course you'd have a healer's touch." Nora looked down at her hands, stained with iodine and blood, despite repeated washing. "James used to say, I missed my calling as a nurse. But out here, we all become what we need to be, don't we?" "That we do," Adam agreed. The night air was cool, and he noticed Nora shivering slightly in her thin shawl. Without hesitation, he removed his coat and placed it around her shoulders. "You'll be cold," she protested. "I've got thicker skin," he said with a small smile. "Comes from living out in the elements." Nora pulled the coat closer, inhaling the scent of leather and hay that clung to it. "Adam," she said softly, using his given name for the first time without prompting, "why did you really invite me to dinner that day?" Adam considered the question, wanting to give her an honest answer. "Because I recognize something in you," he finally said, "a kind of hollowness that matched my own. And I thought perhaps we might feel less hollow together, even if just for the space of a meal." Nora's eyes glistened in the lamplight. "That's the most truthful thing anyone has said to me since James died." "Truth is about all I have to offer," Adam said. That and a willing pair of hands when you need help reaching the high shelves. And then it happened, subtle but unmistakable. The corner of Nora's mouth curved upward, not in a full smile, but a genuine beginning of one that reached her eyes for the first time since Adam had known her. Something fierce and protective awoke in Adam's chest at the sight. In that moment, he knew he would do almost anything to see that smile grow and return more often. "Let me walk you home," he said, rising and offering his hand. "It's late." Nora placed her small hand in his calloused one, allowing him to help her to her feet. "Thank you." They walked in comfortable silence through the sleeping town, their steps synchronized on the wooden boardwalks. When they reached her door, Nora slipped off his coat and returned it. "Will you come by tomorrow?" she asked, a new vulnerability in her voice. "I will," Adam promised. "Get some rest, Nora." She nodded, then surprised him by rising on tiptoe to place a gentle kiss on his weathered cheek before disappearing inside. Adam stood motionless for several heartbeats, his hand rising to touch the spot where her lips had been. Something long dormant stirred within him, not just desire, though that was there too, but a more complex emotion: hope. The following morning, Adam returned to town, bringing with him a small bouquet of wildflowers he'd gathered from the prairie. He felt foolish carrying them, like a love-struck boy rather than a man of 48, but he didn't turn back. The general store was open, but when he entered, he found not Nora, but a young woman he recognized as Beth Wilson, the blacksmith's daughter, behind the counter. "Morning, Mr. Calloway," Beth greeted him. "Mrs. Matthews is at the hotel still, helping with those injured men. Said to tell you she'd be back around noon if you came by." "Thank you," Adam said, hiding the flowers behind his back. "I'll return later." He made his way to the hotel, where he found Nora in the dining room, changing bandages on the young freight handler who had been delirious the night before. She looked up as Adam entered, and that fledgling smile appeared again, warming him more effectively than the morning sun. "You came," she said, finishing her task. "I said I would." Adam produced the wildflowers, feeling self-conscious but determined. "These made me think of you, sturdy enough to bloom in difficult conditions." Nora accepted the flowers, her fingers brushing his. "They're beautiful. Thank you." They were interrupted by the doctor, who needed Nora's assistance with another patient. Adam spent the morning making himself useful around the hotel, carrying water, helping move patients, and even repairing a broken chair in the lobby. By noon, the crisis had fully passed, with all the injured men stable enough that they no longer required constant attention. Nora placed the wildflowers in a small jar of water, insisting on keeping them nearby as she and Adam walked back to the store together. "I need to reopen," she explained. "Poor Beth has been managing alone all morning." "I understand," Adam said, "but I was wondering if you might consider closing early today. There's something I'd like to show you, if you're willing to ride out to my place." Nora hesitated, clearly torn between duty and curiosity. "What sort of something?" "A surprise," Adam said. "One I think you'll appreciate. I'll have you back by nightfall, I promise." After a moment's consideration, Nora nodded. "I'll close at 4. Will that work?" "I'll be waiting with horses," Adam replied, unable to keep the pleasure from his voice. True to his word, Adam returned at 4 o'clock with 2 horses his bay gelding and a gentle mare borrowed from the livery stable. Nora emerged from the store, wearing a divided riding skirt that Adam hadn't seen before, her hair braided simply down her back. "You look like you were born to the saddle," Adam commented as he helped her mount. "Hardly," Nora laughed, actually laughed, a sound that made Adam's heart skip. "James taught me to ride when we first came west, but I was a terrible student. I've improved since then, but I'm no horsewoman." "The mare's gentle," Adam assured her. "Just follow my lead." They rode out of town at an easy pace, heading west toward Adam's ranch. The late afternoon light gilded the prairie grasses, and a cool breeze made the ride pleasant despite the summer heat. Nora kept up admirably, clearly more comfortable on horseback than she'd let on. "It's beautiful out here," she remarked as they crested a small rise. "I forget sometimes, being in town all day." "That's the thing about the prairie," Adam replied. "It's always changing the light, the colors, the mood, never the same view twice." They arrived at his ranch as the sun was beginning to lower in the western sky. The main house was modest but well-maintained, with a wide porch and sturdy corrals nearby. Eduardo emerged from the barn to take their horses, tipping his hat respectfully to Nora. "Everything's ready, boss," he said to Adam with a knowing smile. "Thank you, Eduardo." Adam helped Nora down from her horse. "This way," he said, offering his arm. He led her not to the main house as she expected, but around it toward a small rise behind the property. As they crested the hill, Nora gasped softly. Before them was a small grove of cottonwood trees surrounding a clear pond fed by a natural spring. Under the largest tree, Adam had set up a simple picnic, a blanket spread on the ground, a basket of food, and beside it, something covered with a cloth. "What is this?" Nora asked, clearly moved by the gesture. "This was Thomas's favorite spot on the ranch," Adam explained, his voice softening with the memory. "He used to come here to read, or just think. Said the water and the rustling leaves helped clear his mind." He led her to the blanket, where they sat together looking out over the pond. The setting sun cast long shadows and turned the water's surface to molten gold. "It's peaceful," Nora observed. "I can see why he loved it." Adam nodded, then reached for the cloth-covered object. "This is what I wanted to show you." He removed the cloth to reveal a small, portable piano, not a full instrument, but a 3-octave melodeon that could be transported by wagon. "Adam!" Nora breathed, her eyes widening. "Where did you get this?" "It belonged to my wife, Elizabeth. She brought it from Boston when we married, and it's been in storage since she passed. Thomas used to play it sometimes. He had a natural ear, like his mother." Adam ran his hand over the polished wood. "I had Eduardo clean it and tune it best he could. I thought, maybe you'd like to play again." Nora stared at the instrument, then at Adam, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I haven't touched a piano in 15 years. It's like writing," Adam said gently. "I suspect it'll come back to you." Hesitantly, Nora reached out to touch the keys, pressing one and then another, testing the sound. The notes rang clear in the evening air. She positioned her hands properly, and after a few false starts, began to play a simple melody that gradually grew more confident. The tune was sweet and slightly melancholy, a folk song that Adam vaguely recognized. As Nora played, her face transformed, the years of grief momentarily lifted by the joy of rediscovering something long lost. When the song ended, she looked up at Adam with genuine wonder. "How did you know how much I needed this?" "Because music heals something that words can't touch," Adam said simply. "At least, that's what Elizabeth used to say." Nora played several more pieces as the sun set, each one flowing more naturally than the last as her muscle memory returned. Adam watched her, captivated by the animation in her face, the way her body swayed slightly with the rhythm, the passion that emerged through her fingertips. Between songs, they ate the simple meal. Eduardo had prepared cold chicken, fresh bread, early apples, and a bottle of good whiskey that Adam had been saving for a special occasion. They talked easily, sharing stories of their lives before grief had reshaped them. "James would have liked you," Nora said, as darkness fell and the first stars appeared overhead. "He appreciated straightforward men who said what they meant." "I think I would have liked him too," Adam replied honestly. "Any man who collected adventure books and married a woman who plays piano like you must have had good sense." Nora laughed again, the sound becoming more natural each time. "He was a dreamer, really, always planning our next venture, our next improvement to the store. He's the one who insisted on ordering books and sheet music, saying a town needed culture to truly grow." "He wasn't wrong," Adam observed. "Though I admit, I never gave much thought to such things until Thomas started showing interest." They fell silent for a moment, both contemplating the loved ones they'd lost. But for perhaps the first time, the remembrance brought not just pain, but also warmth. "I should get you back to town," Adam said reluctantly as the night deepened around them. As promised, Nora nodded, running her fingers over the melodeon keys one last time. Would it be presumptuous to ask if I might come play again sometime?" "Anytime you wish," Adam said immediately. "In fact, if you'd allow it, I'd like to have Eduardo bring the melodeon to your apartment. It should be played regularly, not sitting out here gathering dust." Nora looked at him with surprise. "Adam, I couldn't possibly accept such a gift." Not a gift, he clarified. A loan, for as long as you want it. Their eyes held for a long moment, and Adam felt the air between them change. Charged with something electric and fragile, slowly, carefully, he reached out to touch her cheek, giving her every chance to pull away. She didn't. Instead, Nora leaned slightly into his touch, her eyes closing briefly. When they opened again, there was a new certainty in them. Adam, she whispered, and it was both a question and an answer. He leaned forward, closing the distance between them, and kissed her gently. Her lips were soft beneath his, tentative at first, then responding with increasing assurance. When they finally separated, both were breathing a little faster. I wasn't sure if you'd want that, Adam said hoarsely. Neither was I, Nora admitted. But I do. I have for some time now. They rode back to town beneath a canopy of stars, closer now, shoulders occasionally brushing. Adam escorted Nora to her door, where they shared another kiss, longer this time, and filled with promise. I'll have Eduardo bring the melodeon tomorrow, Adam said as they reluctantly parted. I'll be waiting, Nora replied, and this time her smile was full and radiant, transforming her face into something luminous in the lamplight. As promised, the melodeon arrived the next afternoon. Eduardo and Adam carefully carried it up the stairs to Nora's apartment, placing it by the window as she directed. The small sitting room instantly seemed more alive with the instrument in place, as if the very air anticipated music. That evening, after the store closed, Nora played for hours. The sound drifted down to the street below, drawing small crowds of curious townspeople who stood listening in appreciation. Many couldn't remember the last time music had filled the air in Lusk. In the days that followed, Adam found reasons to remain in town. He took a room at the hotel, explaining to Eduardo that he needed to attend to business matters. The ranch hand merely smiled knowingly and promised to keep things running smoothly. Adam and Nora fell into a pleasant routine. He would help at the store during the day, learning the business with surprising aptitude. In the evenings, they would share dinner, either in her apartment or at the hotel restaurant. And afterward, Nora would play the melodeon while Adam listened, sometimes adding his voice to familiar songs. The townspeople noticed the change in both of them. The somber widow was smiling again, greeting customers with warmth rather than mere politeness. The reclusive rancher who had once barely spoken 3 words together was now seen laughing in the street, tipping his hat to ladies, and even occasionally joining the men for a friendly game of poker at the saloon. You two are good for each other, Sheriff Fuller remarked one afternoon when he found Adam helping Nora stock shelves. Whole town's talking about it. Let them talk, Nora said with newfound confidence. It's been too quiet around here anyway. As summer gave way to early autumn, Adam and Nora's relationship deepened. They shared not just joys, but vulnerabilities. Nora confessing her feelings of failure at not providing James with children, Adam revealing the guilt he carried for not stopping Thomas from enlisting. You couldn't have stopped him, Nora said one evening as they sat on her small balcony, watching the sunset. He was a man making his own choices. I know that here, Adam tapped his head, but not here. He placed his hand over his heart. A father is supposed to protect his son. Nora covered his hand with her own. And a wife is supposed to give her husband children. We can torment ourselves with what should have been, or we can accept what is. And what is? Adam asked, turning to look at her. This, she said simply. Us. Now. They were interrupted by a commotion in the street below, raised voices and the sound of breaking glass. Adam was on his feet instantly, peering over the railing. Below, 3 rough-looking men were harassing the young Chinese laundry worker, who had recently set up shop in town. One of the men had smashed the laundry's front window and was now shouting threats. Stay here, Adam told Nora, already heading for the stairs. Be careful, she called after him, but he was already gone. Adam emerged from the store just as Sheriff Fuller arrived from the opposite direction. The lawman had his hand on his revolver, but was clearly outnumbered. Evening, gentlemen, Adam said calmly, positioning himself beside the sheriff. Seems to me you've had enough excitement for one night. This ain't your business, Calloway, growled the largest of the men, whom Adam recognized as Harlan Betts, a troublemaker known for his dislike of foreigners. We're just explaining to this Chinaman that we don't want his kind here. Mr. Chen has every right to operate his business in Lusk. Sheriff Fuller stated firmly. "Now, back off before I have to arrest the lot of you." Betts spat on the ground. "You and what army, Fuller? You're one man with a badge in a town that's growing too big for you to handle alone." "He's not alone," Adam said, his voice hardening, "and neither are you the voice of this town." From the gathering crowd, several other men stepped forward to stand with Adam and the sheriff, the blacksmith, the barber, and even old Mr. Finch from the land office. The show of solidarity clearly surprised Betts and his companions. "This town's changing, Harlan," the blacksmith said. "Either change with it or move on." Betts glared at them all, clearly weighing his options. Finally, he jerked his head at his companions. "Come on, boys. It ain't worth the trouble tonight." To Adam, he added menacingly, "This ain't over, Calloway. You're not even a proper resident anymore. Splitting your time between that failing ranch and the widow's bed." Adam's fists clenched, but Sheriff Fuller placed a restraining hand on his arm. "Let him go," the lawman advised. "He's just trying to provoke you." The crowd dispersed as Betts and his friends slouched off toward the saloon. Adam helped Mr. Chen board up his broken window, promising to return the next day to properly repair it. When he finally made his way back to Nora's apartment, he found her waiting anxiously. "What happened?" she asked, immediately checking him for injuries. Adam explained the confrontation as he washed Betts's spittle from his boots. "Men like that resist any change, any newcomer they don't understand." "They resent you too," Nora observed worriedly. "Because of me." "Let them," Adam said dismissively. "Their opinions matter less than nothing." But Nora wasn't so easily reassured. "Betts has friends, Adam, and he's right that you've been neglecting your ranch to stay in town with me. I don't want to be the cause of trouble for you." Adam took her hands in his. "You're not the cause of anything except my happiness, Nora. As for the ranch, I've been thinking about that. Eduardo can handle the day-to-day operations, but you're right that I need to spend more time there, especially with winter coming." He hesitated, then continued, "I was wondering if you might consider coming out to the ranch sometimes, not just to visit, but maybe to stay. Occasionally at first, and then—" "Are you asking me to marry you, Adam Calloway?" Nora asked directly, her eyes searching his face. "I suppose I am," Adam admitted, surprising himself with the realization. "Not very romantically, I'm afraid." A slow smile spread across Nora's face. "Actually, I think it's perfectly romantic. But there's much to consider. The store, for one. It's my livelihood." "We could keep it," Adam suggested. "Hire someone to manage it day to day, with you coming to town regularly to oversee operations. Or sell it, if you prefer. The ranch generates enough income for both of us." "That's not the point," Nora said gently. "The store was James's dream, his legacy. I'm not sure I can simply walk away from it." Adam nodded, understanding her hesitation. "I'm not asking you to decide tonight, just to think about possibilities. We could even build a new house, if you'd prefer not to live where Elizabeth and I did." Nora touched his face tenderly. "The house isn't the issue, Adam. I'm not afraid of Elizabeth's ghost. I think she'd approve of us finding happiness together. I just need time to sort through what this means for me, for my life." "Take all the time you need," Adam assured her. "I'm not going anywhere." But events had a way of forcing decisions. 2 nights later, Adam was awakened in his hotel room by pounding on the door. It was the night clerk, wide-eyed with alarm. "Mr. Calloway, fire at the general store." Adam was pulling on his clothes before the man finished speaking, racing down the stairs and into the street in his stocking feet. The night sky was lit orange with flames coming from the back of Nora's store, where her apartment was located. Terror seized him as he sprinted toward the blaze. A small crowd had already gathered, and someone was organizing a bucket line from the town well. Sheriff Fuller grabbed Adam's arm as he tried to rush toward the building. "She's safe, Calloway! Nora's safe!" The words penetrated Adam's panic, and he whirled to find Nora standing nearby, wrapped in a blanket, her face streaked with soot, but blessedly unharmed. "Thank God," he breathed, pulling her into his arms. "What happened?" "Someone broke in," Nora said, her voice shaking. "I heard glass breaking and got out just before the fire started. They must have brought coal oil, it went up so fast." Adam held her tighter, his mind immediately going to Betts and his threats. The sheriff seemed to be thinking the same thing. "I'll find who did this," Fuller promised grimly. In the meantime, get her somewhere safe. The townspeople fought the fire valiantly, but by dawn, it was clear that the general store and everything in it, including the melodeon, was lost. Nora watched from across the street, her face a mask of shock and grief, as the roof finally collapsed in a shower of sparks. Adam took her to the hotel, where the owner's wife provided clean clothes and a hot bath. When Nora emerged from the bathing room, she looked exhausted but composed. "It's all gone," she said, sitting beside Adam on the bed. "Everything James and I built, everything we collected over 15 years. "I'm so sorry," Adam said, feeling the inadequacy of the words. "We'll rebuild it, if that's what you want." Nora was quiet for a long moment. "Do you know what I thought of, watching it burn? Not the merchandise or the ledgers or even the personal belongings. I thought of the melodeon and how much joy it had brought back into my life." She looked at Adam with clear eyes. "And I realized that the joy wasn't in the instrument itself, but in what it represented, the possibility of beginning again." She took his hands in hers. "I don't want to rebuild the store, Adam. I want to build something new, with you." Relief and joy flooded through him. "Are you saying yes then?" "I'm saying yes," Nora confirmed. "Yes to marriage, yes to the ranch, yes to whatever comes next." They were married 2 weeks later in the small Lusk church, with most of the town in attendance. Sheriff Fuller had arrested Harlan Betts for the arson after finding coal oil-soaked rags in his cabin, along with items stolen from the store. The evidence was overwhelming, and Betts was awaiting trial in the county jail. With the insurance money from the store, Nora and Adam decided to build a new general store in Lusk, with Beth Wilson hired as manager. This would give the town the supplies it needed, while allowing Nora to focus primarily on her new life at the ranch, coming to town twice a week to check on operations. Their wedding night was spent at the ranch in the master bedroom that Adam had renovated completely, removing the old furniture and replacing it with new pieces they had selected together. It was a symbolic fresh start, a room that belonged to them both rather than holding memories of the past. As they lay together in the darkness afterward, Nora rested her head on Adam's chest, listening to his heartbeat. "Are you happy?" he asked softly, stroking her hair. "Happier than I thought possible again," she answered truthfully. "Are you?" "More than I can say." Adam kissed the top of her head. "I never expected to find love twice in one lifetime, especially not after Thomas." Nora propped herself up on one elbow, looking down at him in the moonlight streaming through the window. "Thomas would be proud of you, you know, for finding the courage to live fully again." "Just as James would be proud of you," Adam replied, touching her cheek gently, "for that beautiful smile that's returned to your face." The following spring brought new beginnings in more ways than one. The ranch flourished under their combined management, Adam's practical knowledge of cattle and land, complemented by Nora's head for business and accounts. The new store in town was doing well with Beth's capable oversight, becoming a gathering place for the community. And on a perfect May morning, as wildflowers covered the prairie in a riot of color, Nora shared news that left Adam momentarily speechless. "A baby?" he finally managed, his voice thick with emotion. "Are you certain?" "The doctor confirmed it yesterday," Nora said, her hands resting protectively over her still flat stomach. "I wanted to be sure before I told you." Adam gathered her in his arms, tears streaming unashamedly down his weathered face. "I never thought, at our age—" "It's not common," Nora acknowledged, "but not impossible either. I'm healthy, and the doctor sees no reason for concern." That evening, Adam rode out alone to the small fenced plot on the eastern edge of the property where Thomas was buried. He hadn't been able to recover his son's body from the battlefield, but he'd created this memorial place where he could speak to his boy. "You're going to have a brother or sister," Adam said to the simple wooden cross bearing Thomas's name. "Imagine that, son. Life finds a way to go on, to create new joy even from the ashes of grief." He touched the cross gently. "I wish you could have known Nora. She's brought music back into this quiet house, real music, not just the wind in the eaves." As the months passed, Nora's pregnancy progressed without complications. The entire community embraced the news, with gifts of handmade baby clothes and offers of help arriving regularly at the ranch. Even Mr. Chen from the laundry brought a beautiful embroidered blanket, explaining that in his culture, children were considered the greatest blessing. Adam found himself watching Nora constantly, marveling at the changes in her body and the radiant contentment that seemed to surround her like an aura. She continued to play the new melodeon he had surprised her with on their 1-month anniversary, claiming that the baby responded to the music with increased movement. In late December, as a gentle snow fell outside, Nora gave birth to a healthy son whom they named David James Calloway. He had his mother's amber eyes and, from the beginning, a curious gaze that reminded Adam poignantly of Thomas. "He's perfect," Adam whispered as he held his son for the first time, wonder and terror mingling in his heart. To love so completely again was both a gift and a vulnerability. Nora, exhausted but triumphant, reached out to touch Adam's arm. "He is, and so is this all of it, the life we've built together." As David grew, so did their happiness. The following year brought a bountiful harvest and the best cattle prices in a decade. The new general store expanded to include a small library section, fulfilling James's dream of bringing more books to Lusk. On David's first birthday, they held a celebration at the ranch, inviting friends from town and neighboring homesteads. Eduardo, now promoted to foreman, had built a rocking horse as a gift for the boy, while Beth Wilson presented a hand-stitched quilt depicting scenes of ranch life. After the guests departed and David was tucked into his crib, Adam and Nora sat on the porch, watching the stars emerge in the vast Wyoming sky. Her head rested on his shoulder, his arm wrapped securely around her waist. "I was thinking about that day you first came to the store after James died," Nora said reflectively. "How empty I felt, how certain I was that I would never smile again." "I remember," Adam replied. "You looked like I felt hollowed out, just going through the motions of living." "And now look at us," Nora marveled, gesturing toward the house where their son slept peacefully. "Who would have thought we'd find our way here?" "Not me," Adam admitted. "I figured I'd just fade away on this ranch, with only memories for company." Nora turned to face him, taking his weathered face between her hands. "Thank you for giving me back my smile, Adam Calloway." "Thank you for giving me back my heart," he responded, pulling her closer. Above them, a shooting star streaked across the night sky, a brief, brilliant moment of light against the darkness. Just like grief, Adam thought, watching it fade. Just like joy. Both temporary, both transformative, both part of the grand, mysterious pattern of life. But unlike the star, the love they had found would not fade. It would continue to grow, taking new forms and facing new challenges, but remaining constant, a light in the wilderness, a hearth in the cold, a melody rising from strings once silent. Together, they had learned that beginnings could emerge from endings, that happiness could be built from the broken pieces of sorrow, not as replacements for what was lost, but as new chapters in lives still unfolding. As they walked hand in hand back into the house, back to their sleeping child and their shared future, Adam felt a profound sense of rightness settle in his soul. The war that had raged inside him since Thomas's death had finally found its peace, just as Nora had found her smile again. And in the quiet Wyoming night, beneath a canopy of endless stars, two souls once adrift had found their harbor in each other's arms, proof that even in the wild unpredictability of life, love could still find its way home.